Hello. I know some of y'all folks out there with crusty engine bays, but don't be ashamed. You can redeem yourself just by painting the valve cover. Let's go from this disgusting 25-year-old flaking off one to a beautiful OEM refinished one, just like this. First things first, a quick recap on removing a valve cover. There's three main things you gotta remove. There's some bolts around the perimeter and some in the middle. You're gonna have to pull out your spark plug wires or ignition coils and any hoses you might see, such as a crossover hose or a PCV hose. And then from there, the valve cover shall just pull off if you're lucky, revealing a beautiful valve train. And there we go. Now anytime you remove a valve cover, it's a good idea to replace the valve cover gaskets. This runs all the way across the groove and it's going to help prevent any future oil leaks. So just grab it from one corner, gently work him out all the way, and don't forget about the spark plug tube seals as well. 1, 2, 3. Next up, grab some degreaser.
And go to town. Spray it on the top, on the bottom, any crack and crevice.
Yours doesn't have to be foaming, but you gotta admit the foaming one is kind of fire, not gonna lie. It's kind of fire. It even helps to take a sponge and really work that stuff in. The goal is to remove as much oils and greases as possible. And there you go. I'd say we did a pretty good job. Next up, grab a hose and hose it down. It's coming along beautifully. Sweet, now grab a paper towel, wipe him down, because we need him kind of dry for the next step, which is stripping off all this old paint that's caked on. Using none other than some paint stripper, and apply a nice, thick, juicy layer to the top of the valve cover. This stuff comes in liquid and spray, but I find the spray is a little bit easier to use. Now wait about 15 minutes while that stuff works its magic. And there we go. That did a great job of lifting the paint up off the middle. But to give it that extra push, we're going to use a plastic scraper or the same sponge as before and really just work that paint. See, it comes right off. Just work your way around the whole entire thing. This is so satisfying. And that looks amazing. There's just one more thing before we get to sanding. Now if you look closely, you'll notice the paint stripper leaves behind kind of an oily sheen. That's why these perfectly formed water droplets are still on there, kind of like when you wax your car. So what we have to do one more time is spray on the degreaser, wait about a minute, and then wipe it off with a paper towel. Now the big question is, what grade sandpaper should I use? And that's actually going to depend on the type of paint that you're using. So since I'm using wrinkle paint as opposed to regular spray paint, you can be a bit more aggressive with the grits of sandpaper that you use. So I'm going to start with 150 grit to smooth down specific areas. Anything that's like corroded or rusted, you're going to want to smooth it down with a more aggressive grit sandpaper, such as the 150 grit. Then I'm going to hop up to a 400 to 600 grit sandpaper or a 360 to 600 grit scuffing pad. Keep in mind these two are interchangeable. You can use whatever you can get your hands on. I just find that the scuffing pad is a little bit easier to maneuver around the valve cover, like around the valleys and the grooves, so I'm going to go with that. Starting off with the 150, you can see it does a beautiful job of knocking down any corrosion, rust, oxidation, and that's going to make it that much easier when it comes to the next step of scuffing down the whole thing. Speaking of scuffing up the whole thing, now you can see all the high spots are taken down with that 150 grit, and it's looking a lot more even in color. Not that you should pay attention to the color too much, so much as the smoothness, but they go hand in hand. Now go in with stage 2, which is the 360 grit scuffing pad, and you're going to work down the whole thing as evenly as possible. As you can see, I'm using back and forth motions. I just find that's a little more efficient, but obviously in crevices like this, you can go up and down instead or rotate it around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the goal is to have it smooth and rough at the same time, so the primer has something to grip onto. Alright, and we're almost done with the sanding step, which is the most time consuming. But here's 2 more quick tips. Number 1, if you're having an issue getting into like a groove or crevice, just grab a middle wire brush. The bristles are pretty long, so it's going to help you get into those tough to reach spots. And number 2, if you plan on achieving a brushed aluminum look to the letters like these ones on the bottom, you're going to want to sand them down before we start painting. Using a nice side to side motion, do a few passes with 220 grit to remove any discoloration, a few passes with 400 grit to smoothen that off, and then a few final passes with 1000 grit to give it a nice polished look. To make sure you sand as evenly as possible, you can use a sandpaper wrapped around a sanding block. This was like $10, or you can wrap your sandpaper around a block of wood. And once that's done, I think you know the drill. Except this time, I'm gonna dry it off with a microfiber towel instead of a paper towel. That's gonna ensure no lint gets left behind when we go to paint. It's also gonna help pick up any residue or sandpaper that may be left over, and it might look something like that. Next up, go ahead and mask off any areas you don't want to get paint on. Use masking tape for any large opening. This includes the oil fill hole and the 3 spark plug tube holes. And use earplugs to block off any of the smaller holes, such as the ones where the bolts go. Once you're done, it should look something like this. Now it's time to do one final wipe down to remove any oils or grease. So get some rubbing alcohol on a clean microfiber towel and just wipe down the entire surface nice and thoroughly. Finally, if you plan on painting the letters a different color as the valve cover or just leaving them as brushed aluminum, grab some lip ice and lightly coat the top of each letter. This is going to make it way easier to remove any paint at the end. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. It's finally time to paint. So go ahead and grab your primer, go ahead and grab your base coat, color coat. In this case I'm using Black Wrinkle Plus, and just make sure they're suitable for high heat. So you can see this one withstands heat up to 500 and this one withstands heat up to 350. So both of these will work just fine. Starting with the primer, shake up the can for a good solid minute, then apply one light even coat. Light meaning you should still be able to see some of the valve cover shining through. Now wait 10 minutes. Then apply a second light coat. After that, it should look something like this. We have about 90 to 95% coverage. Now wait 10 minutes. Now onto the wrinkle coat. If you're using regular spray paint enamel like this, you'd want to do a third medium coat of primer and then wait another 10 minutes. But since I'm using this stuff, we could just skip that third coat and start applying this. Once again, shake up the can for a good solid minute, then apply 3 coats. One heavy coat from this angle, wait 10 minutes. One heavy coat from this angle, wait another 10 minutes, and then a third heavy coat diagonally. And when I say heavy, I'm not kidding. Like, you have to apply this stuff really heavy or else I guess the particles won't link up and it won't wrinkle. And after the third coat, this is looking beautiful. Now you have 2 options as far as letting the wrinkles produce. You can either wait 2 hours and let this thing air dry. The wrinkles will eventually come, or you can wait 20 minutes, whip out a heat gun and heat this thing up evenly. I'm gonna go with the second method. Alright, got the heat gun. This is the most satisfying part. You're gonna want to heat this thing up evenly in circular motions. Don't stay in one spot too long, and let's get it. Alright, and 48 hours later, it's looking great. Completely dry. We got some good wrinkling action going on down here. Up here, it's not quite as much, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the results. Now we gotta get these letters down here, looking like these ones up here. So grab an X-Acto knife or something sharp and scrape off the top of each letter. Because we applied the lip ice, it should come off nice and easy. And that looks pretty good. We got most of that dried paint off there, but we need them looking like that. So go ahead and do the same sand-in steps as before. You're going to do a few passes with 220, a few passes with 400, and then a few final passes with 800 grit to shine it up. And last but not least, if you want to paint the logo or the letters a different color as the valve cover, you know the drill. Go ahead and mask off everything. Wipe down the surface with some rubbing alcohol, then apply 3 coats of primer, 3 coats of base coat, and 3 coats of clear coat. And once that dries, it should make the whole thing pop. And after the final coat, it should look nice and crisp like this. Now we'll let it dry for about 12 hours. Psych, it's 2 a.m., but I'm impatient and I really want to see what this looks like. It's been about 6 hours, so that should be good enough. It's inside. Let's go ahead and rip off all this tape. Bam. That is beautiful. This is my first time seeing it. You guys probably saw it on the thumbnail. It turned out amazing. Complete transformation from the original. And the best part is it only costs 30 bucks. You could do it at home and you could have fun with it. If you want to make the logo orange, if you want to make the letters white, the valve cover green, you know, I don't judge. You could do that. So the last thing we need is a new valve cover gasket. We'll throw that guy on and then let's go ahead and put it on the car. And just when you thought it couldn't get any better, look at this. In the house, finished is one thing. Seeing it on the car is a whole completely different thing. Okay, straight up, you guys really gotta do this. Just go out there, do it, and have some fun.